Welcome everyone to our webinar on supporting nursing students through APA style. As you're joining, please feel free to tell us where you're joining from in the chat. We'd love to hear. Our panel is varied in geography and we'd love to hear where you're coming from. My name is Andrea Bergoa. I am the Higher Ed Course Adoption Marketing Manager here at APA Publishing. We are glad to have you here today. I'm going to go over a couple housekeeping items as everyone gets settled. So again, please tell us where you're joining from the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Just a few notes on communication. All attendees are muted and have their video turned off, but that doesn't mean that we can't interact. So please use the chat to talk amongst yourselves. If you have questions for our panel, please use the Q&A function because the chat does tend to move quickly sometimes and we can't catch questions that come in through that method. So use Q&A, we'll be monitoring that. And as far as closed captioning goes, it is enabled. So if you need closed captioning, it is available to you through the captions button at the bottom of your screen. Reactions are also enabled. So if you would like to react and tell us how you're feeling, that's available as well. As far as resources go for this webinar, we will be sending you a follow-up email with a recording of the session, and that recording will also include a chat transcript. So if you feel like you've missed something in the chat, don't worry, it will be there in the recording. Also, please feel free if you feel like you've missed something to ask, and we can repost it. And finally, as a thank you for attending this session today, we will be sending attendance certificates. So please look for that in the coming week. That is not an automatic process. It is manual, so just have a little patience with us as we get those out to everyone who is in attendance today. And once more, I just want to thank everyone for attending today. We're so happy to have you here, and I will turn it over to Samantha to start our presentation.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are discussing how to support nursing students and promote evidence-based practice through APA style. My name is Samantha Denany. I'm the development manager on the APA style team, and we're the team that's responsible for APA style guidelines, including the publication manual and the concise guide to APA style. And we have a special guest here today, Justine Bailey. Justine is a registered nurse and passionate educator from Ontario, Canada. She's worked in nursing practice, education, and leadership for nearly 20 years. She's also a nurse entrepreneur, and her business, Just Like That, utilizes social media and content creation to educate and empower nurses and students to lead meaningful lives and professional careers. So our aim for today's session is to give you some actionable takeaways that you can use to integrate APA-style lessons into the nursing curriculum. So we're going to talk about today why use APA style more than just, somebody told me I had to. Best practices for teaching APA style. We'll talk about the importance of APA style in nursing, integrating APA style into the nursing curriculum, and then we'll talk about an example assignment with a rubric that you guys can use elements of in your future classes. As Andrea mentioned, we will have time for questions at the end. So go ahead, as questions come up, please pop them in the Q&A. I see the chat is moving, so we can interact with you there, but if you want to make sure we see your questions, definitely put them in the Q&A. So to start, why use APA style? So I know a lot of students can be a little skeptical of using APA style. They think that, okay, these are just some rules that I have to follow. But getting student buy-in can be really important to help them understand the full picture of how something like using APA style can connect to being a good researcher. And being a good researcher can create better writers and ultimately better nurses. So sometimes, as I mentioned, these APA style guidelines or writing style guidelines in general can just seem like arbitrary rules. And really, what we're looking to do is create guidelines that are a framework to save writers from reinventing the wheel. So instead of wondering and thinking about, how to format something, there is a history of scientific communication that has established the best ways to do that. We also really want to promote good communication, which is clear and concise. We also believe that citing sources appropriately gives credit where credit is due, and that's a part of writing with integrity. And scientific papers that are well formatted make it possible to find and reproduce important information. So using APA style can really be an important part of adding to, nursing literature. And sometimes students will think, okay, I have to memorize all of this information. I have to figure out APA style before writing a paper. And really, no one has ever memorized all of APA style. We do have some editors that I think are probably close, but really, APA style, we have handbooks and the publication manual available. So students, if they understand how to look up information, they can really be in a good place to be able to just look up information as they go. They don't need to kind of front load a ton of memorization to start. So since 1929, we have been creating APA style guidelines to support excellence in communication. And our three guideposts are clarity, precision, and inclusion. And these are the most important elements to APA style and kind of our guidepost for how APA style is created. So in terms of clarity, what it means to be clear is to explain yourself logically, use language that readers will understand, follow spelling and grammar conventions, avoiding confusion by maybe omitting information that you need or including extraneous information, describing scientific literature impartially, and describing methodology in such a way that others can replicate your work. So a really good way to help ensure that your writing is clear is maybe to have your students have another student read their work and explain it back to them. And if there are any points of confusion, those are places where maybe they could be a little bit more clear. We also encourage precision in language. So being precise means choosing specific nouns and verbs. So instead of saying something like, people believe or we believe X, Y, and Z, talk about specifically who you mean. So we encourage avoiding the editorial we and also providing exact numbers and statistics rather than approximations. So I'm sure all of you have probably read a paper where a student has said many people state that, XYZ, and really we're looking at specific numbers and statistics from a credible source rather than using vague wording like many or a lot or, again, the editorial we. We also promote inclusive language, and what it means to use inclusive language is just to describe people with dignity and respect and choose appropriately specific terms. So we promote using words that people use to describe themselves. And to give you some additional information on this, we're going to be sending around our brief guide to bias-free and inclusive language. So this is, our recommendations are based on real research with real people. And it's going to provide recommendations like general principles for avoiding bias and then topic-specific advice. So if your students are writing about working with older adults, for example, instead of saying something like the elderly, it would be more appropriate to specify maybe an age range, like people 65 and older. This also goes into things like disability, gender, race and ethnicity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and things like that. So it can be helpful when writing about people that students have some guidance in terms of what the research shows are some ways to talk about people in a way that respects their dignity. So let's talk a little bit about some best practices for teaching APA style. The first one is to teach students about good sources. And I know this, sounds easier than it really is in practice. We all know that a student can type some information into Google right now and they could get millions of potential sources. And it can be really difficult for students to be able to evaluate these sources critically and understand if this is the kind of information they should be citing, or maybe if it is, not something that they should have in their papers. So when evaluating a source, we recommend ensuring that the source is relevant to your topic. And this can often be established by looking at the abstract, making sure it's something you should be reading, that it's written by experts, that it's peer reviewed. And we know that as you go further in the research process, there are definitely exceptions to that rule, but for a student starting out, it can be helpful to look in peer reviewed journals, and that it's published in an academic journal or book, and that it's current and not outdated. So APA does not have any specific guidelines for what it means to be an outdated source, because that's very topic and context dependent. But we know that sometimes instructors might use something like like in the last 5 years, or, they may provide other guideposts for students to understand a current and not outdated work. A recommendation for this is to use the resources that your library provides, starting with a recommended database, like maybe like CINAHL or something like that, can be a really good way to help your students. So they're not just seeing, millions of things that are created by AI and all of these other things. And one thing that we think is pretty interesting is that the elements that I talked about of a good source, you can tie these directly to the parts of a reference. So if there's one thing to know about citing a reference in APA style, it's author, date, title, source, right? And making that connection between the author, ensuring that it's written by experts, the date, making sure it's current and not outdated, the title, making sure it's relevant to your topic, and the source, ensuring that you're using a good source that's published in an academic journal or book or peer reviewed, can be a really good thing to kind of instill in your students to help them not only to remember an easy way to cite a reference being author, date, title, and source, but also reinforcing that they need to really look at each element of this reference to ensure that this is a good source that they want to be citing. So another handout that we're going to be sending along is the Anatomy of a Journal Article handout. And from finding sources, the next step is to read the journal articles, right? And students who are just starting out, they might be very intimidated by looking at a journal article and trying to understand what it's trying to say to them. So we recommend pairing this handout with whatever journal article already fits into your curriculum. And this is not only going to reinforce elements of learning APA style, but it's also going to help them be more efficient and effective readers. Knowing what an abstract is and to kind of go there and find information can be extremely helpful. So we think that sometimes students think about APA style as being like outside of what they're doing in their nursing education. They don't necessarily see that direct tie between Learning to Be a Good Nurse and APA Style. And by pairing the journal articles that you're already having them read with learning a little bit more about how these articles are put together can be a really great way to share that with them. We also recommend teaching little bites of APA style over time. And it can sometimes be difficult to get everybody on the same page within your nursing program, but having some consistency in terms of how APA style is required can be really helpful. Also, reinforcing concepts over time in every class can be really useful. So some small ways to teach APA style that ties into the curriculum includes things like using active voice and scholarly tone. So if they're writing a discussion post, or if they're even sending you an email or something like that, can they use a scholarly tone? If they are learning how to use a reference text to look up information, that can be really important. And that can translate to later using the publication manual. And then presenting information in a clear, readable manner, no matter what that information is something that translates really clearly to using APA style, and that can be used throughout the curriculum. We also encourage creating a tip sheet. So if students are struggling with certain elements of APA style, maybe write that down somewhere and carry that with you throughout the classes you're in, or use one of our tip sheets. So we are going to share with you our student paper checklist. And all of these articles, or I'm sorry, all of these handouts are free on our website. We will also be sending them via email, so no worries if you miss anything. But oftentimes we see that some instructors can give a lot of instructions for how what to write a paper about, and then they'll just have as like a footnote, use APA style. And that can be really difficult for students to actually see, what does this mean? Where do I start? So this is just going to walk them through everything from, okay, here's how I'm doing my title page. These are some things to look at in terms of my writing and grammar, my in-text citations, and things like that. So instead of that, just use APA style, we're going to show you a rubric that's going to rely partially on this checklist. So we're giving really clear instructions for the students to help them be successful when using APA style. So let's move on to Justine talking about the importance of nursing, of APA style in nursing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Samantha. Really, really excited to be here. I'm going to build on what Samantha has just spoken about and kind of plopping that into the context of nursing programs. We know that APA, it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. What is this going to look like in terms of supporting our students to use APA style? So first, let's talk about the importance of APA style in nursing. Why have APA style in nursing school? You know, one of the goals I think of every nursing program is to prepare students to communicate clearly and effectively, right? And this includes students' ability to write, because we know that being a good communicator is such a critical part of nursing. Also, in terms of success in a course, typically success in a course equates to the ability to write well. That's kind of how some of our nursing courses are designed in terms of the evaluative components. Lots of essays, lots of papers, lots of reflections, writing, that sort of thing. Each discipline, including nursing, has its own language. We have our own nursing lingo. And in nursing, we use APA style to engage with other professions and express our ideas and arguments. When we write using APA, we can have academic discourse or dialogue with other professionals, and we can influence others to adopt our view and our perspectives on an issue. And lastly, because there's more emphasis on evidence-based practice, writing an APA allows us to communicate evidence in a professional and credible way. Next slide, please, Samantha. Okay, so, but what's in it for our students? We all know APA is good for them, but convincing them could be something different, right? Oftentimes students come and ask me, well, why do I have to do this anyways? Like, what is the point? So how can we get students to actually buy in to using APA? Well, here are some ideas that we might want to consider. When nursing students build strong writing skills, they're stronger communicators. And this is going to carry them through their career, right? When it comes to their documentation, when it comes to developing policies or procedures or developing patient education materials or newsletters or blogs. So with time, when students use APA style, they begin to value their writing and develop their professional identity. It helps also build their confidence, right? Because with more practice and effective feedback that they get from us as the educators, they learn how to write in a way that can persuade others and convince others to adapt their perspectives. AP is also good in terms of being able to defend their opinions. You know, I know for me, a big thing I ask my students is why? Why? Provide rationale. Why are you doing this? Why did you decide to do this over that, right? So having an idea or viewpoint and then being able to back it up with research or literature and defend their position is a good thing. It's a good skill to have, and APA helps us do that. And finally, applying nursing knowledge. APA helps students apply their nursing knowledge because this is where they review research and evidence, critically analyze it, and then adapt it into the context of nursing practice in a meaningful way. Next slide, please. Okay, so when it comes to integrating APA style into the nursing curriculum, the good news is that we're already doing something. And we've been successful in some regards with respect to implementing APA already, but obviously there's opportunity for improvement. So here are some things we're currently doing. So we have things like general writing courses that may not be specific to nursing. So we may have students taking, a communications course, writing 101. This course is often included as part of the mandatory requirement for program progression. We may also be implementing nursing-specific workshops or seminars that are put on by our libraries or colleges that focus on foundational writing schools, foundational nursing writing skills, excuse me. And this is helpful for year 1, year 2 students, ESL students as well, to help them kind of build that confidence in writing. We may also be implementing nursing course assignments that promote writing development, where we're getting students to develop their critical thinking, develop discipline-specific writing skills. We could also see kind of this scaffolding involved, where we might have students tackle a large assignment by breaking it up into smaller assignments at a time. And this is a way to develop their scholarly writing skills because they're given opportunity to get feedback at different increments of the course. So scaffolding is another method we use. And educators are faculty behaviors. Educators often provide feedback and encourage student participation in writing. So even our approach to giving feedback supports students to develop their writing skills. So we may arrange one-to-one meetings with them. We may arrange a small group review where we review assignments in small groups after class or before class. The main point or the bottom line here is that educators are the catalysts. You and me, we're the catalysts in the experience of writing for students. We play a very important role in developing students' writing ability and their journey to becoming great communicators. Next slide, please, Samantha. That was the slide. Yes. So bottom line here is you and me, educators, we play a very important role in terms of developing students to become great communicators. Okay. Next slide. Now, as much as we want students to be effective writers, I want to acknowledge there are barriers that exist, right? It's not all hunky-dory all the time, right? Here are some barriers that have been outlined in one research article here. Inconsistencies in faculty expectations. So every faculty member has a different, I guess, tolerance for errors in grammar or sentence structure and mechanical mistakes, we can get crazy with our red pens, right? We can get real crazy with it. Some instructors might be harder or stricter when it comes to marking assignments. And so the expectations vary from class to class to class. And anecdotally, I know students have expressed this multiple times, right? Where there's inconsistencies with the faculty. The second barrier is faculty failing to spell out writing expectations. So this comes back to poorly designed rubrics or assignment instructions that don't clearly articulate the expectations around APA style. Samantha, when she was talking, she mentioned, the assignment instructions may say, use APA style or use APA referencing. Well, that's so broad, right? Like we have to think about, is that clear enough for students, right? I'll share this with you. This last semester, I had an assignment and APA was not in the rubric. So, students were expected to follow APA style. It said it in the instructions, but lo and behold, the rubric didn't include anything about APA grammar or spelling. So I had students getting a 90% on their assignment with no in-text citations. Go figure, right? The third barrier I want to talk about here is an overemphasis on rigid writing rules. Now, as much as APA is really important, we have to remember the main point of course assignments is not only about APA, right? It's about getting students to develop those critical thinking skills, those reflective skills, those analysis skills, right? Keep in mind, the overall goal of APA is to develop their communication skills. So when faculty or educators use language like, you can't use first person, or you can have no errors with in-text citations, it kind of lends to getting students to perceive writing in a more kind of negative way, right? Writing loses its magic, its charm, its glamour, and then students become so focused on just the grades, right? They become extrinsically motivated by the grades, and that's a barrier to writing as well. Finally, the high penalties for APA formatting. When there's too much focus on rigid writing rules and less focus on thinking about nursing practice or competence, that can be a barrier. And this goes back to the rubric, right? And the weighted points that are allocated to APA or grammar or spelling. Now, we don't want the assignment to weigh too heavily on APA, but we don't want to completely ignore it either, right? So there is this fine balance. Now, I'm going to ask Andrea. I have a little polling question for all of you. In a moment, Andrea is going to put up a poll here. Which barriers have you and your students experienced? Select all that apply. So I've just talked about all four. I'm interested to see which ones have you experienced with your students. So I'll give you a moment to answer that. I'm gonna answer as well. Let's see if I can answer. Oh, I can't vote because I'm a panelist. Okay, well, I'll wait for the results then.
Your voting privileges are revoked because of your status. All right, we'll give you just 10 more seconds. We've still got a few people still responding. 3, 2, 1. All right, here are our results.
Wow. See, the research doesn't lie. These numbers are telling me, yes, these are barriers that all of you are experiencing and your students. So yes, you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing too. This is great confirmation. Thank you everyone for participating there. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the million-dollar question now, right? How can nursing educators effectively support students to use APA? So I want to build on what's already been presented and focused on 4 best practices. Okay, so next slide. We know this isn't going to involve just one strategy, right? We need to think about this from in a multi-pronged way. And here are 4 evidence-informed strategies for nursing educators to consider. The first one being clear expectations. So developing well-designed rubrics that identify performance levels and articulate the necessary skills within each criteria. This is also a change in paradigm, right? Where we're trying to emphasize deep learning and analysis and critical thinking and less on writing as an activity-oriented task, right? So the mechanics. And that's hard, right? To outline that fine balance. But let's not forget the main point of the assignment is to develop those skills as far as, critical thinking and analysis and clinical judgment. Okay. The next best practice strategy here is creating consistency across faculty in terms of consistent grading. Recognizing that each faculty grader has different tolerance levels. I might be heavy with my red pen and Samantha just might be, a few ticks here and there. We can minimize inconsistencies by establishing well-designed rubrics with clear criteria and sticking to the rubric. So being very objective, but also having very clear language and criteria that both instructors and students can understand, right? The other best practice strategy I want to talk about is formative assessment. And this relates to feedback using the rubric criteria. So I love rubrics, right? Because as an instructor, as an educator, it guides the way I grade. But I have to remember, it's also an opportunity for students to get feedback. Students want feedback, right? Especially when it comes to their writing. So if we can identify gaps or areas of development in our feedback, students then have an opportunity to incorporate that feedback in a timely manner. So when we're giving feedback, right, it's important to comment on both the substance of the assignment, so the students' ideas and their perspectives, but also the appropriateness of formatting and grammar and mechanics. So for example, you might say, you integrated relevant literature to support your ideas. Remember to cite your article using the author date citation system. So there's this kind of marriage, right, between commenting on the substance, the thinking, but also the writing and the APA style, okay? The last best practice strategy here is assignment sequencing. And this goes back to what Samantha was saying in that slide where it had like the cookies, like doing it incrementally, logically sequencing assignments so that students can do a little bit, and then building, and then building, and then building towards a final project or towards something much bigger. This type of sequencing or scaffolding ensures students can work towards their final goal while getting opportunities for feedback throughout the semester. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we're now going to look at a reflection assignment. I'm calling this section, APA style spotlight. We're going to put a spotlight on an actual nursing assignment. And in a moment, I'm going to share with you an example. And I'm going to show you an example of a nursing assignment. It's a reflection assignment. At first, I'm going to show you the assignment instructions. And we're going to take a look at those instructions as a group, and then we're going to say, like, is it good? Is it bad? What will we change? Is it clear? Then I'm going to show you the assignment rubric, as I've been talking about rubrics all along, okay? Now, keep in mind, as we review the instructions and the rubric, keep in mind those best practices that I just talked about: clear expectations, grading consistency, feedback opportunities, and assignment sequencing. Next slide, please. All right, so here's an example of instructions that I would give my students for a reflection. So I'll give you a moment to read through those instructions, and then we'll do a poll. So we'll give you a moment. There's the infamous review the assignment rubric, use the APA guide, right? Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to review it very quickly. Just scan it. Andrea, if you could put the polling questions up for us, please. Are the assignment expectations clear and realistic? What do you think? Yes or no? And are the APA style expectations clear? What do you think? If you want to type more about what you think, you can put that in the chat box as well. But let's do the poll first, and then we'll share the results in a moment.
We'll leave the poll up for another 10 or 15 seconds.
Okay.
At about 50% of people responding
All
thus
right.
far. This one definitely takes a little more critical thinking.
Yes.
It takes more than just 2 seconds of relating your own experience. All right, we're slowing down on responses, so I'm going to say 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Amazing. Okay. All right. Assignment expectations are clear for the most part. People, 74% said yes. Oh, but when it comes to APA style expectations, all right, the majority of people said no. All right. So thank you for that. Thank you for that participation. So we can see from the results, there's opportunity for improvement here, right? Let's now move to the rubric. Next slide, please, Samantha. All right, so I'm calling this exercise, this or that. Okay, in a moment, I'm going to share with you 2 versions of the rubric, the assignment rubric. Your job is to tell me if you'd prefer this or that, right? So you tell me as an educator if you prefer one rubric over the other. Now, remember, when it comes to rubrics, we want them to be well designed, right? They need to be user-friendly, simple language. They have to identify performance levels and the grading criteria and describe each criteria for all of the levels that are identified. Okay, so we're going to let's look at rubric 1. Go ahead, Samantha. All right, let's pull up rubric 1 for this assignment, this reflection assignment. Here we go. Okay, let's have a look at this. We see the different criteria. We see the levels across the top there. Would you be satisfied using this rubric for the reflection assignment? I'm interested. Just put your comments very briefly in the chat box. Would you be, satisfied with this rubric? No, needs detail. Yeah, nope, not really. Too subjective. Okay. Very vague. Exactly. Oh, heavens, no. Oh, heavens, no. Okay. All right. So it doesn't sound like most people are into it. Rubric 1 needs some work, it sounds like. Okay. Let's look at rubric 2 now. Samantha, if you can pull that up. All right. Rubric 2. Here we go. Have a quick review of this rubric now. What's different about this rubric versus the other one? Drop your comments in the chat box. What's different about this rubric versus the other one? And Samantha, I'll get you to kind of scroll down to the latter part. Exactly. APA style, evidence-based practice. What's different with this rubric versus the other one? You can drop your comments in the chat box. Much better. Detailed. Yes. More specific criteria. Yeah, and it follows APA style rules. Excellent. More detailed. This makes sense. I'm glad it makes sense to you, Amanda. I hope it makes sense to students too. Specific stats and numbers. That's a great one because now we can objectify things, right? Things get really objective. Then there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Okay, so I'm seeing you guys are preferring this one much more than the other one. Is there anything you would change or add to this rubric? Put it in the chat box. Is there anything you would change or add to this rubric? Anything you would change, add, anything you would tweak a little bit? Yeah, I appreciate the links in the rubric so students can quickly access. Yeah, I love that part of it too. Can you draw it down the screen? Yeah, scroll down the screen a little bit, Samantha. Anything you would change or add? Okay, list by bullets. Yeah, if you can, that's more of a formatting thing, right? If you can, maybe not as wordy. Not sure if it would take away the objective. Yeah, so maybe simplifying it a little bit to make it more concise. Sure. Words some or most. Okay. Yeah, keeping in mind the different levels, right? We need to keep those words clear in terms of the different levels. Have specific numbers of error to what few or many means. Yeah, that's true. Being more objective. What do we mean by few? What do we mean by many? Right? If we can put a number in there, that would make it a lot more clear. Exactly. Barbara says the exact same thing. Few and what is many. Yeah, excellent. Excellent. The critical thinking but I love it. I love it. Thank you all for participating in that activity. So it's sounding like the second rubric is the one that most of us prefer, right? Okay. Numeric scoring. Yes, there is a numeric scoring. I believe it's out of 40 at the top there. If you scroll up, yeah, there is a number in the end that they would get, and that's what would be issued to the student. But yes, good, great feedback. Thank you, everybody, for that. Samantha, next slide, please. Someone mentioned this in the chat box. What I really liked about rubric 2 is that checklist. That checklist that was referred to in the as a hyperlink. And this is the checklist Samantha was referring to at the very beginning, right? It's such a great quick tool that students can use as they're writing. It could be uploaded to your learning management system as a quick reference guide. And if you can embed it in the rubric, even better, right? Because then it will prompt students and the faculty and the instructors, right? So, so grading becomes a little more consistent. Okay. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, next slide. So just in terms of what are we taking away, just the main points here, just to summarize, the ability to communicate clearly and effectively is a critical part of quality nursing care. Educators, that's you and me, are the catalysts in the experience of writing for students. Integrating APA style into the curriculum is multi-pronged, and we saw evidence of that, right? It's not just a one size fits all, one strategy is going to fix it. We know that. Some best practices for effectively integrating APA style include setting clear expectations, grading consistency across faculty, feedback opportunities for students, and that can be done through rubrics, and finally, assignment sequencing. Assignment rubrics can play a critical role in helping nursing students develop their writing skills. And we could see just from looking at rubric number 2, when students look at that rubric, it's pretty clear what's expected, right? And similarly, when instructors are using it to grade, it's pretty clear what they need to be graded on, right? So rubrics can play a huge role in terms of supporting students to use APA style. All right, next slide, please. And maybe I'll turn it over to Samantha at this point.
Yes, so we will have time for questions. So please get any questions that you might have into the Q&A function. So please, any questions you might have about teaching APA style in general, or, nursing education questions. So if you and your students want to learn more, of course, there's the publication manual, Concise Guide to APA Style, Mastering APA Style, which is a student workbook. We have a whole lot of social media channels for you guys to share with your students or maybe use yourself. We also have a lot of free material on the APA Style website. If you are writing a paper and have a really tricky citation or something like that, you can email us at styleexpert@apa.org. Justine also has a lot of fantastic content that you can dig into more. You can see the social media links here, website, and her email address. And we do have a couple of nursing specific things that you might be particularly interested in. We just updated our clinical practice references. So if your students are citing things like up to date, drug information, a lab manual or diagnostic manual, a mobile app, I'm pretty sure your students at some point are going to have to cite some of these. We have specific examples that are going to come into play for nursing students. So that's free on our website. You can go ahead. I think we will pop this link into the chat and you can share that with your students. That's a great thing to link on your LMS, just because we know that nurses are going to be citing some things that don't come up as the most common reference types for other majors and other subject areas. We're also really excited to share that Justine has partnered with us on a YouTube video that's coming to the APA Style YouTube channel. So it's not completely ready to go yet, but we're expecting it in the next week or two. And when we send a follow-up to you, we will let you know when this is available. And this is going to go through the top 5 sources for nursing students in APA Style. So this is going to be a really great resource for you all to share with your students to help them understand nursing citations. So let's dive into some questions. It looks like, and again, please get any questions you have coming in through the Q&A. The first question we have is, are there any suggestions about how to detect predatory sources? I'll start out with that one and then turn it over to Justine. But this is a really great question, and it's a really difficult one because predatory sources are going to try to mimic good sources as much as possible. They're going to try to look, completely legitimate. So something that I would suggest for students is to use their library resources, to use databases like Medline, Scopus, CINAHL, Web of Science, things like that are going to kind of filter out some of those journals that might not be good sources for students. I would also suggest making sure that they're looking up the journal, making sure it exists. Sometimes a predatory source might come up with a journal name that is almost exactly like a legitimate journal, making our lives a little bit more difficult. But just checking for, is it good grammar? Is it good, like, do the websites make sense? Is this author somebody who actually exists? It can be really hard. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably been contacted by journals that are offering to publish your writing, maybe for a fee and things like that. And it can be hard to figure it out. There's also a website, I believe, that is Retraction Watch, which helps to sort out some of these predatory sources. Justine, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I would just going back to the piece I was saying about, providing students with feedback. If we do notice there are predatory sources in their writing, again, with the emphasis being on, it's not only about APA and sources, but giving them credit to, yes, you've cited something correctly, but keep in mind, credible. We want the sources to be credible, right? So consider using this alternate source or cite the primary source. So that's the only thing I wanted to add to that piece. But in terms of detecting predatory sources, I'm not sure if programs like Turnitin does that. That's something I don't know. That's something I would actually put out there. I don't know if any of you know that. Or Samantha, do you know?
I don't think Turnitin
Okay.
would, but yeah, it's just the same kind of things that we say when looking at a um, you know, a general credible source. And Rachel asked below, what is a predatory source? So because there is such pressure to publish in academia, there are some kind of bad actors that try to make money on putting out information that might not be a good creditable source. Um, so we do see that every so often. So Wendy asked, do you include discussion of use of AI in teaching writing and APA? So this is a really good question and something that we've been looking at a lot. So our thoughts in terms of using AI and teaching writing is to be extremely clear in terms of what your expectations are for students. So I believe there was just a news story about a student who used AI and you know, got in trouble and they're suing the school or something like that. But in your syllabus, it's very important to disclose what are your expectations. We have a blog post that's going to teach how to cite AI. We know that that's not appropriate in every situation. You may choose to say, you know, please don't use generative AI in this class or use it in these specific ways. But we believe that if somebody is going to use AI, we want them to be extremely transparent in how they do that. So I don't know, Andrea, if you could find the blog post on citing AI. We also recently had a conversation with the Monitor, which is APA's journal or APA's like newsletter on using AI, and we can try and dig up that newsletter for you as well. That gives some best practices in terms of using AI and APA. Justine, do you have anything to add to
Yeah, I acknowledge it. Students are going to use it. It's here to stay, right? So I do acknowledge it in my courses as well, but I always do revert back to the school's AI framework. We have an AI framework at our institution, so reverting back to that and lots of resources through the library. But as far as that's pretty much all the discussion we have with respect to AI.
So it looks like we have a question. Somebody asked why Times New Roman. So we actually have moved forward in our recommendations for the specific font to use. Times New Roman is a handy one that is acceptable. We do have other fonts that are acceptable. Our goal in terms of recommending certain fonts is that we want it to be very legible and we also want it to be accessible. So there are some fonts that work better with things like screen readers that have the appropriate, you know, contrast for people who might have low vision. So Times New Roman can just be an easy one that we all remember, but there are other acceptable fonts as well. And we're really looking at what can you read easily at a glance and what is accessible to the larger community. Justine, anything on that one? This one I'm going to ask specifically to you. It's asking about resources or recommendations specifically for international and or L2 students.
What are L2 students? Is that
Yeah, if you want to respond to that. I'm not sure what L2 students are, but anything in particular that you've noticed in terms of international kind of
second language?
Oh, English is the second language. Great.
Yeah. This is a hard one because they struggle. There are different layers that they struggle with. There are different challenges, obviously, for our international students. I don't think there are enough resources out for them, to be honest. Like the manual is one thing, the websites are another, but they really do need a bit of hand holding with through this process because there's that translation issue too, right? So I have them often doing some one-to-one kind of tutoring supports in the library, doing more of the peer review, going to the writing center. But as far as an actual website or a resource that I give them, I don't have anything in particular that I use. I don't know if there's anyone else on the call that does. If you do, I would love for you to share it, but it is more of extra library supports for them.
Great, thank you. We also have some specific recommendations when it comes to, let's say, international students who might be writing in like a non-Roman alphabet. We have specific guidelines for things like transliteration, that those are available on our blog. We also have recently come out with a specific landing page for beginning students. That doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have to be beginners, but it's written at a level and includes links to our more introductory material. So that might be a good option for people who might have those needs. And then Justine, Janet Beth asks, any general guidance on how much of a grade should be related to APA/mechanics?
I don't typically have a specific percentage. In my experience, it has been less than 10%, usually around that 5% ish, but it depends what the course is, right? If it's a writing course, then obviously there's going to be more weight associated with that, right? So again, it just all depends on what the purpose or goal of that particular assignment is. But in my experience, it has been usually no more than 10%.
I think I really liked how you put together the rubric with the APA style kind of mechanics piece, and then with the evidence-based practice piece, which pulls in the references and things like that. I think that in terms of what we hear sometimes is that some students will say, okay, I lose 5 points if I don't do APA style, so I'm just not even going to try and just take the hit of the 5 points. And that's obviously not something that we want to see. That's not something that's going to help them in the future. So I think making sure that if it is kind of a research type class or something like that, make sure that instead of it just being APA style, things like what we did in terms of evidence-based practice, where they're asked to pull in creditable sources. That's kind of an element of APA, and things like that, and just see kind of what your students are doing and experiencing and what they kind of need help with. Great. So it looks like we are right on time, which is fantastic. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much, Justine, for lending your expertise. It's really fantastic to have somebody who is doing this every single day here to talk with us. And everyone, please keep an eye out. We will be sending along the handouts, the recording, certificates, as Andrea mentioned. And please keep an eye out for our YouTube video with Justine that's specifically for nursing citations. I think your students are really going to like it.
Yes. So please look for some emails from us. We won't bombard you all at once. I will space them out. But yes, please look for the recording soonest, then attendance certificates, and then we will get to the YouTube video, and we'll just keep communicating. So we will get you everything we possibly can. And thank you all for being here, and for all of your wonderful feedback and participation. We really appreciate it. Mentioning in the email. Yes, so totally fine to use handouts in classroom. That's what we made them for. So, and you can see that on the APA style page as well with all the instructional handouts. But thank you
Yes,
all so
those,
much.
sorry, those are covered under kind of like the fair use copyright. So if you use them for educational purposes, go for it. If you want to sell them online, don't do that.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Bye.